Hey folks, Drunken Homemaker here with a much needed Monstera propagation update. Hello gorgeous people. I hope everyone is well and hanging in there. 2020 is almost over, so let's hang on to that little bit of information. I wanted to do a Monstera update. I did propagate a Monstera months ago at this point. I will make sure to put the date down here of the original propagation so that you are aware. Today's date is the 12th, the 11th, the 12th of December. That sounds right. And I wanted to share how the propagation is doing. So let's start with OG Harold. This is the name of the original Monstera. So this was sort of the top cutting. And this is the one that's going to be going to my friend Jess. Look at this baby. Look at her. She's gorgeous. She's gorgeous. She's really well rooted in there. She's ginormous and she's going to be very happy. And Jess is going to be very happy that I'm finally shooting this video so she can take home this gorgeous Harold Monstera. There was an incident like a week or two ago where Harold was in my daughter's room and he jumped off the shelf. I think he's getting a little top heavy, so I did put some rocks in here just to stabilize. When it gets dry, he gets a little top heavy and can fall over. So that is the only issue we've had with Harold. Unfortunately, the issue of my kids knocking plants over is pretty common. In this case, they did not knock Harold over. He jumped. I'm kidding. He's just top heavy. Okay. Monstera cutting the second. And if you remember, I had some that were rooted in soil. And so Harold was one of the ones that was rooted directly in soil, doing great. I think that the success rate of rooting it in soil is very high. So that would be my recommendation for the most part. And then I'll talk a little bit about the cuttings that were rooted in water. So let's talk about this cutting that looks amazing, but here's the disclaimer. The disclaimer is that this part is one of Harold's cuttings, and it was rooted directly in soil and it was very successful. This would have been Harold's and was originally Harold's cutting. I will see if I can insert a clip of me rooting that particular cutting. Unfortunately, what happened was that my kids knocked over the cutting and he never really quite bounced back from them knocking him over. So what I did was I took a cutting from my Monstera plant and I rooted that piece in. As you could see, she's rooted. She's very happy. They're all a little dry, so I'm going to be watering them in. But this is Harold. So this is Harold, and this is one of my cuttings. And this one is going to be going to Jessica's mom. And you can see that my Monstera is not as old as Harold is because the fenestrations are different. This is the fenestrations on mine. They're not quite as complex as Harold's fenestrations because he's an older Monstera. Mine is just not that old, and so I think it has to do with age, is my theory. I could be wrong. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. A lot of these cuttings were those little janky leaves that were not looking great. And a lot of these baby Monsteras, and you can tell that they're babies because they have no fenestrations. A lot of these babies are just from a single node cutting. That I originally put in water, but I checked on the water about a week later and it was cloudy. It didn't look great. So actually most of these cuttings ended up in soil almost, I would say, within 2 or 3 weeks. They're doing great. They are fully rooted. They are very happy. These are recycled containers from my local garden center, and they're doing great. They're doing fantastic, and these are recycled. I think, and actually, look, you could see the roots are coming out of the bottom, so it's actually going to be ready pretty soon to be repotted. But they like being a little bit root bound, so I think I'm going to leave them in a while longer. They do need to be dusted horribly, but I'm going to hold on to one of these. You see, this is the one that has the first leaf to have fenestrations. We don't have any fenestrations here. And then let's see this one. This one doesn't have any fenestrations as well. So I think all in all, the single leaf with a node cuttings that I put in water didn't do great in the water for very long, but that was because the leaves were dying. They were not in good shape. So I think from the beginning, I probably should have just put the nodes in soil. And I actually moved them outside, not in direct sunlight. They were in my backyard. I have a huge black walnut tree in my backyard, so it's really well shaded. In the summertime, it was nice and toasty warm, and they loved that. And clearly they did really well, but keep in mind, they were very protected from the sun. I want to say that I had about 5 or 6, and I will look in that original video because honestly, it was so long ago, I can't even remember. But I think I got a pretty good turnout from the little cuttings that I started with. And I mean, if you remember, and again, I will link this video up here of when I propagated Harold originally. He was in rough shape. He wasn't looking great. I think he's looking a lot better. And he's got a growing family, which is really exciting. So this is the babies. This is Harold. Woo! You see, the thing about Monsteras is that they're very bulky. But look at these fenestrations on these leaves. They're just so gorgeous. They're like very intricate. Some of the leaves look like they, and this might be just a little bit of neglect on my end. They were upstairs in my kids' room. Look at this one. This is like one of the OG leaves. Look at that. Okay, hold on. Let me lift it up. That's epic. That is just, and it's a beautiful epic Monstera. Let's see if I have anything else that I wanted to add. Indirect light is important for Monsteras. They don't particularly care to be in too much direct sunlight. They're not happy about it. If you've watched any of Plantarina's videos, you can see that they actually do really well even in low light situations, which is kind of insane to me. But if you think about it in the context of where they grow in the wild, which is usually under the canopy of the rainforest, right? They're actually not getting a ton of light, which is why they really thrived when they were outside during the summer, because we have very humid, hot summers here. So that's, and because it was under a tree, it's very shaded in my backyard. So actually they really thrived in my backyard. They are very, very easy to propagate. I think it helped that we were sort of in the middle of the growing season when I started. So it was the summertime. It was really warm out. I did take advantage of the warm weather, and I really think that sped things along. I can't quite put a number on my success rate, but I would say this one was very successful for the most part because, and I actually had a higher success rate with the soil, and I'm wondering if I had more node cuttings directly in the soil right away, if that would have made a difference. But so far, I have to say I'm very pleased with the results. I don't know that I would recommend doing it right now. Monsteras are so easygoing that they probably will root for you, but if I've learned anything from the rubber plant propagation, it's better to wait for the warmer season. It's just better to wait because I think that my rubber plant propagation didn't go as well. And I think it was because I started in the middle of the winter, which is not the best time to start propagating a plant, especially plants that are climatized to warmer climates, right? And especially somewhere here like Buffalo. In terms of how often do you water it in the soil? In terms of humidity, things like that. We are very humid here in Buffalo, so I didn't particularly worry about the humidity, especially because it was outdoors. And it's very humid here. We do not have we don't have a dry climate in Buffalo, quite the opposite. So actually, I found that just keeping them outside, they were pretty happy with the humidity. In terms of watering schedule, this is something that I see asked a lot in the comments section, especially when we're talking about soil propagation. And there's no right answer. I can't give you a schedule to water propagations because I don't know what your climate is like. And so it's really a intuitive, like for example, I personally like to wait until I can see that the soil is mostly dry. If it's starting to root, I would say keep it moist. So if you're seeing the top 2 inches start to dry out, that's when you want to make sure you hit it with some water. You want to have drainage. You want the water to run out the bottom. And you want to make sure that it stays moist. When you start seeing that it's rooting and it's well rooted in there, and usually how you can do that, and be patient with this step because you don't want to undo the work that you've done, you can just give it a little tug and you can feel that it's rooted. And once you feel that it's rooted, then you can back off of the water. Monsteras tend to like to stay a little moister than other plants that I enjoy. They don't like to dry out fully, in my experience. What's really important is, again, the drainage. They don't like to sit in water. They're going to rot if they sit in water. However, I do notice that they don't like to dry out as much as, we'll say, like a Dracaena, or what's another good example? Oh, pothos is a really good example of a plant that just enjoys drying out in between. And those tend to be the plants that I gravitate towards because I like low maintenance plants. But I mean, I make an exception for the Monsteras because just look at them. They are gorgeous. They're beautiful. But the way that you pay for not keeping them moist is you get like leaves that look like this. They look like they've been chewed on. And that's just because it's dried a little bit. So you just make sure that you stay on top of watering it. Don't overwater. One of the trends that I'm noticing with plant folks is there's this anxiety that goes into propagation. There's an anxiety that goes into taking care of your plants. And what you have to realize is that while it is a science, it's not an exact science, because plants just can be different enough, and household to household, the climate that you have in your household is different, where I can't give you exact care tips. You really have to sort of feel it out for yourself and see what happens. It's a little bit of experimenting, right? What happens if I let the soil get all the way dry? It's a little trial and error. I tend to gravitate towards plants that I know really well, and plants that tend to be really low maintenance. Again, Monsteras have my heart because of their leaves. They just have beautiful, bold leaves, and that's why I will always take the risk on trying to keep them alive and keep them happy. I haven't had that much luck, but this propagation experiment, I think, shows how easy it is to propagate, because I am by no means a high maintenance plant person. And honestly, for most of the summer, I left them out there, and whenever I would remember, I would like run out there and just throw some water. Whenever I was watering the garden, I would just like, drench them real quick. So the drainage was really important. But yeah, just making sure that you have plenty of perlite in your mix, making sure that the roots are getting air in that way, making sure that you are doing it during the growing season. So when it is warmer out, whatever that means for your climate, I think it's important to realize that for everyone, you're going to have a different climate. So depending on that is how often you water, how often you change soil, depending on the type of container you're using. Are the nutrients always flowing out and away from the plant? So how quickly do you need to replenish the soil once it's depleted? Things like that are going to be very personal. So I know I always get a lot of questions about that. So hopefully you stuck around to the end of this video so that you've heard all of this information. I think that the water cuttings, I only kept them in there for a week. And the only reason that I took them out was because the water was cloudy and I can tell that they were starting to rot. The cuttings were starting to rot. So I made sure to move them to soil. For most people, you're not going to experience that. It's just that Harold was in really rough shape when I got him. So we did a lot of surgery, and there was a lot of, yeah. So I do think it's a success story. I'm so excited for Jess to get back her plants. I think she's excited too. But yeah, that's really it for my Monstera update. Hopefully I've answered all of your questions. If you have additional questions, please make sure to put them in the comments section below. And let me know what you would like me to propagate next. If this was helpful, please share it, click like, subscribe, hit the bell notification to be notified when I upload, etc., etc. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.